The steak knife clinked against fine porcelain as my grandfather's voice cut through the dinner conversation. "You've shamed our bloodline, Lauren." The words hung in the air like smoke. Around the long mahogany table, forks froze midair. My aunt gasped softly. My father stared at his plate as if the pattern might offer an escape. My cousin Amber's eyes went wide, darting between us. I blinked, not understanding at first, my mind still processing what he'd just said. Then my grandfather continued, his voice cold and final. "You are no longer welcome in this family. Not at my table. Not at my funeral." Everyone looked away. 23 pairs of eyes suddenly finding the chandelier, the paintings, the wine glasses infinitely more interesting than my face. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to smile. Teddy. "Thank you for everything," I said quietly. I stood, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the silence. Every step away from that table felt like walking through fire. I could feel their stares burning into my back. My grandmother's empty chair seemed to watch me go. She'd died 2 years earlier, and I knew she would have stood up with me. But she was gone and I was alone. The front door of the Pierce family estate closed behind me with a soft click that sounded like the ending of everything I'd ever known. My hands shook as I walked to my car, parked between my uncle's Mercedes and my cousin's BMW. My 12-year-old Honda looked pitiful by comparison. But it was mine. Paid for with my own money. Not trust fund dollars. Not family wealth. Just mine. My name is Lauren Pierce. I was 28 years old when my grandfather decided I didn't deserve his name anymore. Thomas Pierce had built Pierce Realty Group from nothing, or so the family story went. 50 years of legacy. Hundreds of commercial properties. Millions in assets. The kind of empire that made people lower their voices when they mentioned it. I grew up believing that family meant loyalty, unconditional love, the kind of bond that nothing could break. That dinner proved I'd been wrong. Family meant obedience, compliance, following the path laid out for you without question or deviation. I'd committed the unforgivable sin, chosen my own path, and for that I was erased. Just like that. As if 28 years of being his granddaughter meant nothing at all. I used to be his favorite. The golden grandchild. The one who got straight A's, who sat quietly in his office watching him sign deals and charm clients. I'd absorbed every lesson he offered, learning about real estate, investments, and the art of negotiation. He used to call me his little successor, resting his hand on my shoulder with pride. Back then I thought that was love. Pure, unconditional love from a grandfather who saw potential in me. Looking back, I realized it was something else entirely. It was possession, ownership. He didn't love me for who I was. He loved the idea of me as an extension of his legacy. Piece on his chessboard. The moment I stopped playing my assigned role, that love evaporated like morning fog. It had never been real at all. The breaking point came 6 months before that dinner. I'd finished my graduate degree in education and told him my plans. Not just told him, actually. I'd presented them carefully, with charts and projections, treating it like a business proposal. I wanted to start a non-profit foundation for first-generation college students. Kids whose parents never went to college, who had no roadmap for the process. I'd been researching it for 2 years, identifying gaps in existing support systems. My grandfather listened in silence, his face unreadable. When I finished, he didn't yell. He just stared at me like I'd announced I was moving to another planet. "You're throwing away your name," he finally said. His voice was quiet, which somehow made it worse. I tried to explain. "No, Grandpa. I'm trying to make it mean something. Something beyond just money and properties." He froze my trust fund the next morning. I found out when my debit card was declined at the grocery store. A call to the family attorney confirmed it. "Your grandfather has decided to restructure your trust pending your career decisions," the lawyer said carefully. Translation: fall in line or lose everything. My father called that afternoon. His voice apologetic and weak. "Lauren, honey, you just need to give him time. Maybe if you took a position at the firm, just for a year or two, he'd come around." But I couldn't do it. I'd seen what working for Pierce Realty did to people. My uncle drank too much at family gatherings, complaining about the pressure. My cousin Amber had developed an anxiety disorder trying to meet impossible expectations. I didn't want that life, no matter how comfortable it might be financially. I sold my car the following week. The Honda I'd been so proud of, the first thing I'd bought with my own money from a summer internship. It hurt to watch it drive away, but the cash covered the filing fees for non-profit status and 3 months' rent on a one-bedroom apartment with peeling wallpaper and a radiator that clanked all night. That cramped, imperfect space became the headquarters for Pierce Scholars Foundation. I set up a desk in the corner, hung inspirational quotes on the walls, and got to work. The first scholarship went to a girl named Maria whose parents had immigrated from Guatemala. She'd been accepted to 3 universities but had no idea how to navigate financial aid. When I helped her secure full funding and watched her face light up, I knew I'd made the right choice. Holidays continued without me. Thanksgiving passed, then Christmas, then Easter. I saw the photos on social media. My cousins posted pictures around that same oak dining table, champagne glasses raised, everyone dressed perfectly. My grandmother's chair remained empty, but no one mentioned her in the captions. She'd been gone for 3 years by then, and the family had moved on as if she'd never existed. But I remembered something she'd told me the year before she died. We were in her garden, and she took my hand with her frail fingers. "You have his strength, Lauren," she'd said, meaning my grandfather. "His will, his drive. But you'll have to use it against him one day. And when you do, don't apologize." I hadn't understood then. Now I did completely. 2 years after that final dinner, I received a certified letter from Pierce Realty's legal department. My hand shook as I opened it. The language was formal, cold, legal. My grandfather was updating his estate planning documents. My name was being removed from all inheritance provisions. I would receive no properties, no assets, no portion of the family trust. It was as if I'd never been born. I remember reading that letter over cold pizza in my tiny apartment, my heart sinking with each paragraph. Then something shifted inside me. The sadness hardened into determination. Fine, I thought. Let him erase me from his will. I'll build my own legacy. One that doesn't require his approval or his money. One that actually means something beyond accumulated wealth and empty prestige that no one really earns. Pierce Scholars Foundation grew quietly but steadily. First 1 student, then 10, then 50. We helped with college applications, financial aid forms, scholarship essays, and transition support. I wrote grants, organized fundraisers, and worked 18-hour days. The local newspaper eventually covered our story with the headline, "Disowned Heiress Creates Scholarship Fund for Underprivileged Students." The article was sympathetic, focusing on my work rather than the family drama. But of course people connected the dots. I didn't respond to calls from family members after it published. But I saw the article get shared in their social circles. My aunt commented on it publicly, something vague about misunderstandings and different paths. Then silence. They didn't reach out directly. That would have required actual courage and the willingness to defy my grandfather. Neither quality was abundant in the Pierce family. 3 years after being disowned, I ran into him at a charity gala. I'd been invited to speak on a panel about educational equity. He was there as a major donor, his name on a plaque near the entrance. I saw him across the ballroom and froze. He looked older, somehow smaller than I remembered. The commanding presence seemed diminished. His shoulders weren't quite as straight. For a moment, our eyes met across the crowd. Then he walked over, his face carefully neutral. "Lauren," he said flatly, as if saying my name caused him physical pain. Still pretending to be a philanthropist. The words were designed to wound, to diminish everything I'd built. I smiled, genuinely smiled, because I realized something profound in that moment. No pretending involved, Grandpa. He turned away without responding. I watched him go, understanding finally that I didn't need his approval anymore. My cousin Amber called 6 months later. We hadn't spoken since that dinner, but her voice on the phone sounded strained. "Lauren, I thought you should know. Grandpa's sick. Heart problems. He's been in and out of the hospital." For a moment, just a moment, I felt that old pang of love mixed with fear. The little girl in me who'd sat on his lap and listened to his stories. Then Amber continued, her tone apologetic but firm. "He says he still won't see you. Dad asked if he wanted to reach out, and Grandpa said you'd rather fund strangers than visit your own grandfather." The words stung, but not as much as they would have years earlier. "Thanks for letting me know," I said quietly. "I hope he gets better." After hanging up, I sat in silence for a long time, processing complicated emotions I couldn't quite name. 3 months later, he sent a message through my father. Not directly to me, of course. That would have required acknowledging my existence. My father called, his voice heavy. "Lauren, your grandfather wanted me to tell you something. He said if you show up at his funeral, you'll be escorted out. He's made it very clear in his final arrangements." I held the phone, speechless. He was planning for his death, and even then, even facing mortality, he couldn't let go of his anger. Couldn't forgive me for choosing my own path. My father waited for my response. When I finally spoke, my voice was steady. "Tell Grandpa I hope he lives a long life then. A very long, happy life." My father sighed. "Lauren." "That's all, Dad. Take care." I hung up before he could say more. That night I cried. Not for him, but for what we could have had and never would. The call came on a Tuesday morning in October. I was reviewing scholarship applications when my phone rang. My father's name on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "He's gone," my father said without preamble. "Last night. In his sleep." The world didn't pause. Outside my office window, the city kept moving. Cars honked. People walked past. But inside, I felt something heavy shift in my chest. Not grief exactly. Something more complicated. Something unfinished. "I'm sorry, Dad," I said, and I meant it. I was sorry for my father's loss, for the complicated relationship they'd had. My father cleared his throat. "The funeral will be Friday. At St. Augustine's Church. It's private, invitation only. Lauren, I'm sorry, but your name isn't on the list." I'd expected this, but hearing it still hurt. "I understand." "Do you?" he asked quietly. "Do you really?" I wasn't sure how to answer that. The obituary appeared in the newspaper the next morning. I read it online, studying every word. Thomas Arthur Pierce, patriarch of Pierce Realty Group, passed away peacefully at age 86. He is survived by his loving family. Then it listed names. My father, my uncle, my aunt, my cousins, everyone except me. I wasn't mentioned. Not even in the pre-deceased by section, as if I'd never existed at all. They'd erased me completely from his life story. That afternoon I stared at my computer screen for hours, thinking. Then I picked up the phone and called Henderson and Sons Funeral Home. "Good afternoon, Henderson and Sons. How may I help you?" the man answered. I took a deep breath. "This is Lauren Pierce. I'd like to cover all expenses for Thomas Pierce's funeral arrangements. Anonymously." There was a long pause. That's quite generous, Ms. Pierce. May I ask your relationship to the deceased?" "I'm his granddaughter." The funeral director, Mr. Henderson himself, called me back within an hour. "Ms. Pierce, I've reviewed the arrangements. The total cost for everything, the service, the burial plot, the reception, flowers, printed materials, comes to $48,000. Closed my eyes. It was a significant amount, more than I'd anticipated. But Pierce Scholars Foundation had grown substantially. We had corporate sponsors now, private donors, and a healthy operating budget. "I'll transfer the funds today," I said. "But I need absolute confidentiality. No one can know this came from me. Especially not my family. Mr. Henderson hesitated. Ms. Pierce, are you certain? This is a substantial donation. And given that you're not invited to the service. I'm certain. Please send me the account information. That evening, I transferred the money from the foundation's corporate account. Technically, it would be recorded as a charitable donation, a community service. Everything clean, formal, legal, and completely untouchable. Friday arrived cold and gray. I woke early, dressed in black, and drove to St. Augustine's Church. But I didn't go inside. Instead, I parked across the street, far enough away that no one would notice me, close enough to see everything. Black cars arrived one by one. Town cars and limousines. Family members emerged in their formal mourning clothes. My aunt wore an elaborate black dress and a hat with a veil, dabbing at her eyes dramatically for the photographers who'd gathered. Amber adjusted her pearl necklace, posing briefly before entering the church. My father walked alone, looking older than I'd ever seen him. I watched them all file inside, carrying their grief and their hypocrisy. The church bells rang. The service began. I sat in my car, listening to distant organ music, and felt oddly calm. I'd done what I needed to do. The rest would unfold as it would. After the service, the family gathered at the Pierce estate for a reception. I knew this from Amber's Instagram stories, which I watched from my apartment. They showed the crowd, the catered food, the tasteful flower arrangements. Everything perfect and expensive, as Thomas Pierce would have wanted. What I didn't see on social media was the conversation happening behind the scenes. Mr. Henderson had approached my father quietly after the burial, pulling him aside for a private word. Mr. Pierce, I wanted you to know that the funeral expenses were already covered in full. A foundation called Pierce Scholars made an anonymous donation covering all costs. My father blinked, confused. I'm sorry, what? Pierce Scholars. That's... He stopped, realization dawning across his face. That's Lauren's non-profit. Mr. Henderson nodded. Yes, sir. She contacted us directly. $48,000. Everything paid in full. The news spread through the reception like wildfire. I heard about it from a board member who'd attended the service, someone who'd remained friendly despite the family drama. She called me that evening, her voice filled with amazement. Lauren, they're all talking about it. Your father showed people the invoice from the funeral home. Your foundation's logo was printed clearly on the payment confirmation. Your aunt looked like she'd seen a ghost. Amber actually gasped out loud and said, "Wait, isn't that Lauren's organization?" I listened, feeling strangely detached from it all. How did my father react? Yes. He paused. He cried. Right there in front of everyone. Just stood there with tears running down his face, holding that invoice like it was the most precious thing he'd ever seen. That night my father tried to call. I saw his name on my phone 6 times. I didn't answer. Some debts don't require conversation. Some gestures speak louder than words ever could. 2 weeks after the funeral, a letter arrived at my apartment. I recognized my father's handwriting on the envelope immediately. My hand shook as I opened it. The letter was handwritten, 3 pages front and back. It started with an apology. Then it moved into memory, recounting moments from my childhood I'd half forgotten. Finally, it ended with these words. Your grandfather may have been cruel, but he built something from nothing. You did too. You created your own legacy without his help or his money. You're more like him than you realize, Lauren. You have his strength, his determination, his pride. But you have something he never did, compassion. What you did for his funeral, after everything he did to you, showed more grace than he managed in 86 years. I'm so proud to be your father. And I'm so sorry I didn't stand up for you when you needed me most. I read that letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. A journalist covering philanthropic trends called my office the following week. She'd heard about the funeral donation and wanted to write a feature. Ms. Pierce, can you explain why you paid for your grandfather's funeral when he'd publicly disowned you? I thought carefully before answering. Every child deserves a legacy that starts with kindness, not conditions. My grandfather believed legacy meant wealth and property passed down through generations. I believe legacy means how you treat people, especially when they can't repay you. I paid for his funeral because it was the right thing to do. Not because I expected gratitude or reconciliation. Simply because it was right. The quote ran in the Sunday paper. By Monday morning, it had been shared thousands of times on social media. People called me an inspiration. Others said I was too forgiving. Some said I was making a political statement. I was doing none of those things. I was just trying to be the person my grandmother hoped I'd become. The media attention brought unexpected consequences. Applications to Pierce Scholars Foundation tripled within a month. Donations poured in from across the country. People who'd never heard of us before wanted to support our work. We had to hire additional staff to manage the volume. My board of directors held an emergency meeting to discuss expansion. Within 6 months, we'd opened chapters in 3 other cities. My grandfather's name was trending again, but not for his real estate empire or his business acumen. He was trending as the man whose estranged granddaughter had covered his funeral costs after he'd disowned her. The narrative shifted. Some people defended him, saying I must have done something terrible to deserve being cut off. But most people saw the truth. That he'd been a bitter old man who couldn't accept his granddaughter's independence. That his cruelty had backfired, making me stronger instead of breaking me. 6 months after the funeral, I received an unexpected call. The director of a major community trust was on the line. Ms. Pierce, I'm calling to invite you to join our board of directors. We focus on legacy giving and philanthropic education. Your story has inspired our current board, and we'd be honored to have your perspective. I almost laughed. This was the same organization that had rejected my grant application 3 years earlier, saying I was too young and inexperienced to run a serious foundation. Now they wanted my advice. The meeting was held in a boardroom that overlooked the city, all glass and expensive furniture. 20 board members listened as I presented ideas about sustainable giving and building legacies that outlived their creators. At the end, the chair asked a question. What would you say defines true legacy? I smiled, thinking of my grandfather. Legacy is what you leave in people, not what you leave to them. Pierce Realty Group didn't survive long after my grandfather's death. Within a year, the family was fighting over control. My uncle wanted to sell to a corporate buyer. My father wanted to maintain it as a family business. Amber had her own ideas about modernizing the brand. None of them could agree. The company that Thomas Pierce had spent 50 years building was being torn apart by the very people he'd tried to protect through his rigid control. Eventually, they held an auction. Properties were sold off piece by piece. The Pierce Realty name was purchased by a national firm that kept it for brand recognition but gutted everything else. I watched it happen from a distance, feeling neither satisfaction nor sadness, just a strange sense of inevitability. My grandfather had built an empire on control and fear. Without him there to enforce that control, it crumbled. True legacies don't require force to survive. They grow naturally, tended with love and care. On the anniversary of his death, I visited the cemetery for the first time. The gravestone was impressive, black granite with gold lettering. Thomas Arthur Pierce, beloved patriarch, builder of legacies. I stood there for a long moment, thinking about everything that had happened. Then I pulled a small envelope from my purse. Inside was the receipt from Henderson and Sons Funeral Home. The invoice showing payment in full from Pierce Scholars Foundation. I kept it all this year, not sure why. Now I knew. I placed the envelope against the headstone, weighing it down with a small stone so it wouldn't blow away. On the front, I'd written in careful script, "Paid in full, with love, not inheritance." Then I turned and walked away. The afternoon sun was warm on my shoulders, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Complete, genuine peace. Some legacies die in marble halls and fancy boardrooms. Others live quietly, growing in the hearts you choose to lift. My grandfather had spent his life building monuments to himself. I'd spent mine building bridges for others. In the end, I knew which legacy would last longer. And for the first time since that terrible dinner, I felt truly free.